Hey y'all, this is your favorite nerdy girl here, Nerdy Girl Reviews, aka Ross Barron. We are back with another review for Dahmer, Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story. Another Ryan Murphy creation, co-creation as well, from the American crime story, I believe, or crime story canon. Nonetheless, it is currently streaming on Netflix. We're going to get into episode breakdown of this mini docu-series, 10 episodes. If you would like to see hear the full commentary, keep me locked here on YouTube. If you're watching this on Instagram, click the link in bio. If you're watching this on IG Stories, click on the link. It'll link you back to my YouTube channel. I'm also available on TikTok under Nerdygirlreviews. And if you'd like to see more of my commentary, you can find me on SofitoForYourSoul.com. So let's get into it, y'all. Now, this song sounds familiar as what you kept hearing in the promos for it, for Dahmer. This is Casey and the Sunshine Band. Please Don't Go, the 1979 version. I remember it being a big, techno song in the 90s. I didn't even know that there was a 1979 version, but you do hear it consistently throughout this recent mini-series. So also I wanted to make a point that I usually kind of get into the whole fantasy of getting dressed as one of the characters, but I wanted to stay away from the Dahmer character played by Evan Peters, so I opted for more of Glenda Cleveland's. May God rest her soul. She has passed away. I think she passed away in 2012. But that's played by Niecy Nash for this docu-series. And so, again, kudos to the wardrobe and makeup. They really did such a great job and intricacies of the props and how it felt very much like the 90s, even down to like the glasses and the wardrobe for that time period. I think I mentioned that also when I reviewed Elvis, currently streaming on HBO Max, that though they did have all those details down, it still felt like you were being jilted between then and now. And if you're watching a period piece, for me, for people like myself, you like to be devoted to that time stamp, that time period. So I think they did an extremely well job in captivating that time frame. So, and basically most of Jeff's, trajectory as well. So we'll get into that. But I need to change glasses because I'm just using this as a prop. These are real bifocals and it's kind of hurting my vision. But I will be back, and then let's just jump into this real quick. Okay, now we're really back with my glasses. I can see. Nonetheless. But yeah, we are introduced to Jeffrey Dahmer's background. And though we have seen, I think since the story broke in 1991 with his arrest, there's been tons of content out there. There's been a movie, there have been multiple movies, there have been TV movies, there's been books, there's been comic books. And again, I believe even people have mentioned that family members of the victims are not too pleased with this new interpretation of it, just for the simple fact that it still feels very exploitive, and it just doesn't, and again, I can sympathize and totally understand, because it's rehashing something that you try to put in the past. And I've seen other films. When the promo dropped, I just got curious and I started watching other films that are out. I didn't see the 2002 Dahmer film, and there's an extensive list of content out there. But I did see My Friend Dahmer, that was based on his high school friend who had turned his experiences and almost perhaps near-death experience with Jeff and turned it into a movie, which I believe it went on and got really great reviews for Sundance, actually. So, but what I will say is that though that film gives you like the meat and potatoes of who Jeff is and his backstory, so you kind of sympathize more with him. There are instances of sympathy for this particular docu-series, but it's not in the best of light. You kind of understand maybe more of his background, but it doesn't excuse his behavior. And in fact, you delve more into the background of the victims and their personalities. They weren't just bodies, as expressed through one officer in one particular scene when Jeff is arrested, where he makes a point to make it known to Jeff all the names of the victims. And he hadn't even, up until that point, now I don't know if that was fictionalized or if it's actual documentation, where Jeff realizes that he didn't even know their names not that well. He kept mementos after the killings, but he didn't think of them other than just utilizing their body and their body parts. You know, it's really hard watch. This show is definitely not for the faint of heart. You see that this person is coming from a very lonely setting, and perhaps somebody who just never was able to, because we all get lonely as human beings, but this was a totally different concept of what lonely is, and how some people really cannot stand and bear it, or it's just something that is terrorizing to them, that they go to these extreme lengths of not feeling abandoned or alone. The first episode, for instance, is just called episode 1, but it is the most traumatic, I think, of all 10 episodes, because we see what happened leading up to Jeff's arrest, and his last victim that got away and was able to report him and essentially finally point the cops in the right direction. Because up until this point, you know, people in the neighborhood or in his community and even in his apartment complex had a suspicion about him, and to no avail. Specifically, Miss Glenda Cleveland, who in the show she is portrayed as his next door neighbor. But when you do fact checking or you start researching, you find out that she lived in the building adjacent. But nonetheless, it was known that Jeff and his apartment stunk, and that you can't imagine having bodies in different stages of decomposition and it not stinking. So neighbors did complain, but was it specifically Glenda? No. But that was added just for the simple fact to kind of surmise what all these neighbors were going through, and that they themselves were victims as well. Just because they didn't perish like the victims that ended up in his apartment, they still had to succumb to smells, to the smell of death, to all types of things that are traumatizing, that I'm sure a good portion of them, including his last victim, still carry to this day. I think his name is Tracy Edwards. But it is the most excruciating episode, because it's just like this ball of tension. You don't know what's going to happen, but you know that Tracy unfortunately finds out a little too late that he was about to be Jeff's next victim. Thankfully, though, I don't know if the court hearings, because again, you do your own research. I don't think he ever admitted to being gay when he was on the stand. But on the show, it's led to believe that he may or perhaps had to play up the role so that he can find a way to escape. They say that happens often with sex workers, when they find themselves in harm's way, to just kind of fulfill some fantasy, as if they're really digging the possibility of being tortured, to find an escape route. And that's exactly what he does. He just knows something's up. The way that Jeff locks the door, the fizz in his drink, the foul stench, him watching The Exorcist and going into some trance, the satanic Bible he finds in some corner. Everything here screams like, get the hell out. So he's able to punch him, and from what we see gather in the first episode, he injures his eye, and with that one free hand, because he had him handcuffed. And before he did that, he had to kind of like gain his trust. So he's kind of like stroking his hair as Jeff's on his chest, saying that basically he wanted to hear him, basically be scared. His heart was pumping a mile a minute, and he was like, oh, I'm going to eat it. But he thought he was like being sexy or something. Very traumatizing. And he was able to worm his way out, run for dear life. And then the worst part here, and this is what is the meat and potatoes of this particular docu-series, is not just to highlight the heinous and horrible crimes that Jeff committed, but how is it that this man is running down the street begging for somebody to help him. The first thing the cops do is just already have their hand on their guns, thinking he's the one that zonked out of his mind, claiming like if he's running towards you. But again, I don't know. I don't want to prejudge. We've been through a lot with the whole BLM thing, and I've said I don't want to politicize my channel, but it's apparent that the targets are always people of color. They even ask him, are you a little under something? Why do you have that handcuff hanging from your wrist? Not to question like, why are you so traumatized? What is happening here? So after, I'm sure, a lot of like convincing them to finally do what they're to do to serve and protect, he does take them back to Jeff's apartment. And of course, this is the thing with Jeff. Jeff got away with a lot of things because of the simple fact that he looked like the next door neighbor. He looked like the boy next door. He was very convincing. He's blonde, blue-eyed. He looked like almost a church boy. Mind his manners and knew how to conduct himself in public. So people just genuinely, if anything, a lot of people just thought that he was super quiet and shy.